A long time ago in Israel, when the Philistines ruled, a special boy named Samson was born to a woman who had never been able to have children. An angel had come to her and told her that she would have a son. The angel said Samson would be a Nazirite, which means he was dedicated to God from birth. He had one rule: never cut his hair, because his long hair was the secret behind his incredible strength. As Samson grew up, he became famous for his super strength. One of his first amazing feats was fighting a big, scary lion with his bare hands. He tore it apart just like tearing a piece of paper. Everyone who heard about this was amazed. This showed everyone that he had a special power from God. Samson's life was full of adventures and some tough times. He often found himself battling against the Philistines, who were being really mean to the people of Israel, the Israelites. In one incredible fight, Samson was so angry that he picked up a jawbone of a donkey and used it to defeat 1,000 soldiers of the Philistine army. His strength was unbelievable, and everyone knew it was a gift from God. But Samson had a big problem that he didn't see coming. He fell deeply in love with a woman named Delilah. The Philistines found out and used Delilah to trick Samson. They wanted to know the secret behind his strength. Delilah tried many times to find out, and finally, Samson told her about his hair. He said that if his hair was ever cut, he would lose his strength. One night, while Samson was sleeping, Delilah had his hair cut off by a Philistine. When he woke up, he was weak. The Philistines captured him easily. They were harsh and brutal to him. They made him blind and locked him away in prison. It was the saddest part of Samson's life. But in jail, Samson's hair started to grow back, and along with it, his strength was returning. In his final heroic moment, Samson was in a temple filled with Philistines. He prayed to God for strength one last time. With all his might, he pushed against the temple's huge pillars. The temple crashed down, destroying his enemies and himself too. Samson's life serves as a powerful lesson on the consequences of our choices and the unfailing strength of God, even in our weakest moments. In a land of ancient times, there was a man named Jonah. Known for his wisdom, but sometimes stubborn, he was about to face a great challenge. Jonah was very kind. People in the city came to him for help because he was wise and gave good advice. He loved talking to God and prayed a lot, showing he really cared about being good and kind. One sunny day, God spoke to Jonah.
Jonah, you must go to Nineveh, a city lost in wickedness. They do not believe in me, and their evil ways have reached me. In 40 days I will destroy Nineveh, unless you change them.
But Jonah was afraid and didn't want to go. Instead of going to Nineveh, Jonah boarded a ship to Tarshish, hoping to escape his daunting task. Out at sea, a fearsome storm erupted. The sailors, terrified, wondered who had brought this misfortune. Meanwhile, Jonah slept below deck, unaware of the danger. The sailors cast lots to find the cause of the storm, and the lot fell on Jonah. He confessed, "I am running from God's task. Throw me into the sea, and the storm will cease." Reluctantly, the sailors threw Jonah into the raging sea. Miraculously, the storm stopped. The sailors were awestruck and pledged to serve Jonah's God. In the deep, Jonah was swallowed by a giant whale. Inside, it was dark and damp, a strange room. Jonah prayed earnestly, realizing he could not hide from his duty. He promised to fulfill God's command if he was saved. After 3 days, the whale spat Jonah out near Nineveh. Jonah was thankful and knew it was time to complete his mission. Jonah walked through Nineveh, a city of people who were wicked and did not believe in God. He warned them, "In 40 days, Nineveh will be destroyed unless you change your ways." He told them all about the story of the ship and the whale. The people listened to Jonah and started to change, turning from their evil deeds. When 40 days had passed, Jonah camped out in the desert to see what would happen to the city. The people of Nineveh now believed in God and repented. God saw their change of heart and did not destroy the city. After Nineveh was saved, Jonah felt upset. He couldn't understand why God spared a city that had been so bad. God wanted to teach Jonah about caring. So God made a special plant grow to give Jonah shade from the hot sun. Jonah liked the plant a lot. But the next day, God let a worm eat the plant, and Jonah was very hot and unhappy. God asked Jonah,
Do you care about the plant?
Jonah said yes. God then said,
You care about a plant, but I care about all the people in Nineveh, especially the children and animals. They made mistakes, but they deserve a chance to be better.
The story of Jonah teaches us about being kind and forgiving. Even when people do bad things, they can change and be good again. In the ancient land of Israel, there lived a man named Elijah. He lived in a time when it never rained and everything was dry. Rivers dried up, crops withered, and the earth cracked under the scorching sun. People were worried, but Elijah believed that God would help them. Elijah lived by a little brook called Cherith because God told him to go there and hide from King Ahab and his queen, Jezebel, who led the people to worship false gods. Every day, black ravens brought Elijah bread and meat so he could survive far from the city. This was a special way God took care of Elijah. But soon the brook dried up too, so God sent Elijah to a town called Zarephath. There he met a widow who was running out of food. Elijah told her something amazing. If she shared her food with him, God would make sure her food didn't run out until it rained again. And that's exactly what happened. Her jar of flour and jug of oil never ran out. The widow had a son who got very sick. He stopped breathing and died. Elijah was very sad and prayed to God, and miraculously the boy started breathing again. The woman was so happy and knew that Elijah was truly close to God. One day, God told Elijah to confront King Ahab and challenge him to a test to prove whose God is real. He went to a place called Mount Carmel to show the people who the real God was. He challenged the prophets of a false god, Baal. They both would sacrifice a bull on an altar, but they wouldn't start the fire themselves. Instead, they would ask their gods to do it. The prophets of Baal tried all day, but nothing happened. Then it was Elijah's turn. He repaired the altar of God that had been broken, placed his sacrifice upon it, and even poured water over it. He prayed, and suddenly fire came down from the sky and burned up his sacrifice. Everyone was amazed and realized that Elijah's God was the real God. After this, Elijah prayed for rain on top of Mount Carmel. A tiny cloud grew bigger and bigger. Then it started to rain.
Whoa.
Everyone was so relieved and happy. After Elijah made it rain, Queen Jezebel got really angry. Elijah was scared, so he ran away into the wilderness. While Elijah was hiding and feeling really alone, something amazing happened. God spoke to him. God told Elijah that he wasn't alone. There were lots of other people who now believed in God. This made Elijah feel much better. God also told him about new things to do and about a man named Elisha who would help him and one day be his successor. One day when he was with Elisha, a fiery chariot with fiery horses came and took Elijah right up to heaven. Elijah's journey was filled with miracles and the power of God. It teaches us about having faith and trusting in God, even when things seem really tough. In the lands of ancient Babylonia, there was a man named Daniel. He was known for his wisdom and his unshakable faith in God. 3 times every day, Daniel would open his window and sit down on his knees in prayer. He lived in Babylon, a grand city, where he served King Darius, a ruler of great power. Daniel was so good at his job that the king wanted to put him in charge of the whole kingdom. But not everyone was happy about this. Some of the other leaders were jealous of Daniel. They knew he was loyal to his God and prayed to him 3 times a day. So they made a sneaky plan. They went to King Darius and convinced him to make a law that for 30 days, no one could pray to any god or human except to the king. They knew this was one law Daniel would never follow. Daniel, upon hearing this decree, did not change. With the windows of his chamber open, he knelt and prayed, just as he always had. The officials, lurking like shadows, caught him in the act and brought him before the king. King Darius, distressed, realized he had been tricked into condemning his most trusted advisor. Yet the law of the Medes and Persians could not be revoked. With a heavy heart, he ordered Daniel to be cast into the lion's den, hoping in some way his God would save him. As night enveloped the land, Daniel was lowered into the den. The lions, mighty and fearsome, roared and paced. But as Daniel stood among them, a serene calm enveloped him. He spoke softly to the beasts, his voice a steady beacon in the darkness. Miraculously, the lions did not harm him. They lay around him, their usual ferocity replaced with a peaceful presence. All night, King Darius walked around in his palace, struck with worry. At the first light of dawn, he hurried to the den and called out anxiously for Daniel. From the depths of the den, Daniel's voice rose, steady and calm. "O king, my God sent his angel and the lions have not hurt me." Overjoyed, King Darius commanded that Daniel be lifted from the den. Not a scratch was found on him, for his faith had protected him. Then, in a turn of justice, the king ordered those who had conspired against Daniel to be thrown into the lion's den. This time, the lions did not hold back, and the conspirators met a swift end. King Darius issued a new decree, declaring that in every part of his kingdom, people must respect Daniel's God. Daniel's bravery and trust in God protected him from the lions. His story teaches us about staying true to our beliefs, even when it's hard, and how faith can bring us through the scariest times. In the first book of the Bible, there's a story about two brothers, Cain and Abel. They were the sons of Adam and Eve, the very first people. Cain, the older brother, was a farmer who grew crops, while Abel, the younger one, was a shepherd who took care of sheep. One day, both Cain and Abel decided to give gifts to God. Abel gave the best part of his sheep, and God was really happy with his gift. But Cain just gave some of his fruits, not the best ones, and God wasn't as pleased with his gift. Cain got really upset and jealous because God liked Abel's gift more. God saw that Cain was angry and tried to talk to him. God told Cain that if he did good things, he would be happy. But if he did bad things, then bad things would want to follow him. But Cain couldn't stop feeling jealous of Abel. One day, when they were out in a field, Cain's anger got out of control. He took a rock and threw it at Abel. It hit so hard that Abel died from the impact. When God asked Cain where Abel was, Cain said,
"I don't know. Am I supposed to look after my brother all the time?"
But God knew what had happened. God told Cain that because he had killed his brother, life would be really hard for him from now on. He wouldn't be able to grow crops anymore, and he would have to move away and live in a different place. Cain expressed his concern that his punishment was too great to bear, and that others might kill him for his deed. In response, God put a mark on Cain to protect him, so that no one who found him would harm him. Cain left and lived in a place called Nod, which was far away from his family. He had to leave because of the bad thing he did to his brother. The story of Cain and Abel teaches us a lot. It shows how being jealous and angry can lead to doing really hurtful things. It's a reminder that we should try to do our best and be happy for others, and not let bad feelings like jealousy take over. The story also shows that even when people do bad things, God still cares about them and wants to keep them safe. In the very beginning, before anything else existed, there was just God. Then God decided to create the world. The Bible tells us this amazing story in the book of Genesis. On the first day, God said, "Let there be light," and light appeared, separating day from night. God saw that the light was good. On the second day, God created the sky. He separated the waters under the sky from the waters above the sky. On the third day, God gathered the water under the sky into one place, and dry land appeared. He called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters seas. Then God made plants, trees, and flowers to cover the land. Everything started to look colorful and beautiful. On the fourth day, God created the sun to shine during the day, the moon and stars to light up the night. He set them in the sky to mark days, seasons, and years. On the fifth day, God filled the seas with fish and other water creatures. He also created birds to fly across the sky. God saw how wonderful they were and told them to multiply and fill the seas and skies. On the sixth day, God made animals of all kinds to live on the land. There were big animals and small animals, wild animals and gentle ones. Then God did something very special. He created people, a man and a woman. He made them look like himself and gave them the whole world to take care of. He told them to look after the animals and the plants and to have children so that people would fill the earth. Finally, on the seventh day, God had finished his work of creation and he rested. He blessed this day and made it holy because it was the day when he rested from all his work of creating. That's the story of how God created the world in 6 days and then rested on the seventh. It's a story of how everything started and how God made our world with so much care and beauty. It reminds us that everything in the world, from the biggest mountains to the smallest creatures, is part of God's amazing creation. After Jesus was crucified, he went on an amazing and brave adventure before he came back to life. This adventure was to a part of hell where good souls had been trapped and waited for rescue. Imagine hell like a giant, dark cave full of shadows and scary noises. The entrance was guarded by big, spooky gates with scary creatures and demons growling and prowling around. It was a place that seemed really frightening. But Jesus, filled with courage and shining bright, stepped into this dark place. When he entered, it was like a superhero had arrived with bright light. The darkness tried to stay, but it just disappeared wherever Jesus' light shone. The huge gates of hell, which were very scary and strong, couldn't stop Jesus. He spoke in a loud, strong voice, and the gates started to crack and break into pieces. It was as if they couldn't stand the goodness and brightness that Jesus brought. The creepy creatures guarding the gates got scared of Jesus' light and ran away. Jesus walked through the darkness like a brave knight, his light making the scary shadows vanish. There were lots of trapped souls in this dark place who had been waiting for help. They saw Jesus and felt happy and safe. His light was like the warm, comforting sun after a long, dark night. Jesus reached out to them, and they could feel his kindness and love. As Jesus led these souls out of the dark place, the shadows tried to come back. But Jesus' light was like a shield, keeping everyone safe as they walked through the darkness. The shadows couldn't touch them at all because Jesus was protecting them. This adventure of Jesus in hell was like a rescue mission. He was the hero, bringing light and hope to a place where nobody thought it was possible. It shows how brave and powerful Jesus is, and that he can bring happiness and light even to the darkest places. After this incredible journey, Jesus came back to life. We celebrate this when we talk about Easter. It's a time to remember how Jesus beat darkness and brought the chance for everyone to go to heaven. In the book of the Bible, there's a story about when Jesus meets the devil. After he was baptized, he went into a big, lonely desert to spend time alone. He wanted to pray and talk to God. Jesus stayed in the desert for 40 days and nights without eating anything, so he was very hungry. While Jesus was in the desert, something tricky happened. The devil, a bad spirit who tries to make people do wrong things, came to tempt Jesus. The devil knew Jesus was very hungry, so he said to Jesus, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." But Jesus knew it was wrong to use his power just to make himself comfortable. So he said, "It is written, people do not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took Jesus to the holy city Jerusalem and made him stand on the highest part of the temple. The devil said, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone." But Jesus answered, "It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Finally, the devil took Jesus to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. The devil said, "I will give you all of this if you will kneel down and worship me." But Jesus said, "Go away, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." After that, the devil left Jesus. Jesus had shown that he was stronger than any temptation. This story of Jesus being tempted in the desert teaches us that sometimes we have to face tough choices, but we can choose to do the right thing, even when it's hard. Jesus used God's words to help him make the right choices. It reminds us that when we know what is right and true, it can help us stand strong against any kind of temptation. In the ancient land of Judea, a special child named John was born. His birth was a miracle because his parents, Zechariah and Elizabeth, were very old and had never been able to have children. Before John was born, an angel appeared to Zechariah and told him that his son would have an important mission: to prepare the way for the Lord. As John grew up, he became different from others. He lived in the wilderness, away from the towns and cities. His clothes were made of camel's hair, and he wore a leather belt around his waist. His food was simple: locusts and wild honey he found in the desert. John started preaching to the people in the wilderness. He had a powerful voice that echoed through the desert, calling people to repent, which means to turn away from doing wrong things and to turn back to God. He baptized people in the Jordan River as a sign that they were changing their hearts and lives. People started talking about John. They hadn't seen anyone like him before. Some thought he might be the special savior, the Messiah that God had promised. But John always said, "I am not the Christ. I am just here to prepare the way for him." One day, Jesus himself came to the Jordan River where John was baptizing. When John saw Jesus, he knew that Jesus was the one he had been talking about. He said, "Look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." Even though John felt he wasn't worthy to baptize Jesus, Jesus insisted, and John baptized him. As Jesus came up from the water, something miraculous happened. The heavens opened, and the Spirit of God descended like a dove and alighted on Jesus. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." After baptizing Jesus, John continued to preach and tell people about the coming of God's kingdom. But not everyone liked what John was saying. He was honest and confronted people, including King Herod, when they were doing wrong things. This got John into trouble, and he was eventually arrested. John's life had a sad ending. At the request of Herod's daughter, urged on by her mother, Herodias, who didn't like John's criticisms, John was executed. John's role in the Bible teaches us about the importance of being brave and speaking the truth, even when it's hard. Long ago, in a land called Galilee, there lived a man named Jesus. He was a teacher who told people about God's love and how to live in ways that pleased God. Jesus became famous for his wisdom and the miracles he performed. People from all over came to listen to him speak. One day, Jesus saw a big crowd of people who had come to hear him. He decided to go up on a mountainside so that everyone could see and hear him well. His closest friends, called disciples, came too. This is where Jesus gave one of his most famous teachings, called the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus began his sermon with something called the Beatitudes. These were blessings he said to people who were often overlooked or having a hard time. He said things like, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, and blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." He was teaching that God cares for everyone, especially those who feel sad, left out, or are treated unfairly. Then Jesus talked about how important it was to love others, even our enemies. He said, instead of getting even with people who hurt us, we should be kind and forgive them. This was a new idea for many people because they were used to only being nice to their friends. Jesus also taught about being honest, about not worrying too much about things, and about how God provides what we need. He talked about the importance of not judging others and about treating people the way we want to be treated, which is called the Golden Rule. He said that loving God and loving other people are the most important commandments. He wanted people to understand that love is more important than just following rules. After Jesus finished his sermon, the people were amazed. They had never heard anyone teach like this before. Jesus' words were full of kindness, hope, and love. The Sermon on the Mount is still really important today. It teaches us how to be kind and good to each other. It shows us that being humble, caring, and loving is what makes us truly happy and brings us close to God.